Oh, yeah. No.
So. Yep. Pastor is. Yeah, they're nice. Yeah. And they should.
They go well?
Yes.
Good. If I asked her, would she say the same
Yes.
thing? Because that's the only one I have.
Yeah.
I hope so. How about you?
Yeah. You're sure it's time.
All right, well, welcome everyone and call to order the study session of the West Valley City Council. It is Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. We're beginning our meeting at 4:30 p.m. We have most of the council here. We have Councilman Hune, Councilman Norfelt, Councilman Whetstone, Councilman Harmon, myself, will excuse Councilman Fitzsimmons and Councilman Christensen for today. We're also joined at the table with our city manager, Mr. Peely, and our city reporter, Ms. Kamick. We have our minutes from May 14th, 2024. Turn it to the council for discussion or a motion.
Motion to approve the May 14th study meeting minutes. Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we both stand approved.
Mayor, if I can note, Jake just joined us online.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. We have our review of our regular meeting this afternoon. We're just having the opening ceremony and public comment, no action items. And then we'll just adjourn after the public comment. Any questions on that one? Okay. All right, we'll begin with our first public hearing application Z3-2024. And we'll turn the time over to Mr. Pastrick. No?
He's on his way.
Oh.
Thank you, Mayor. This first one is a zone change that is actually being requested by the city. And I would call this one a cleanup item, if you will. Let me share my screen here. So the property here is at 3575 South, 5200 West. So the property in question, you can see it's actually a portion of a parcel. The overall parcel is a little bit under an acre. And we're requesting that the western portion, so about 0.4 of an acre, be rezoned to the R110 zone. So it's currently zoned A. And so again, here's a close-up of that. So right now there is a home on the property. And for this to really make sense, you need to understand a little bit of the background, and this will be familiar to the city. So just the east portion of this property is within the RM zone. So the council fairly recently rezoned the eastern portion of this parcel along with the property to the north for a new subdivision. It's the one by Kiowa Court. That may ring a bell. In fact, this image here shows that concept plan. And the far south end of this subdivision is the eastern part of the property in question. Okay. And this last image, I believe, is the one that helps explain why we're doing that. So the entire property is comprised of the blue and the yellow. Okay. The yellow was rezoned to make way for the subdivision, but the blue was not. And the blue is less than half an acre. So really, we should have done this at the time the subdivision came in. So we're basically just rezoning the blue so that what's left will be in compliance with the area requirements of the zoning. So there's nothing new proposed here, just recognizing that this parcel would be, once the subdivision is recorded, would be less than half an acre. So.
So would it change what's on it?
No.
Okay.
So, I suppose the owners have been notified and,
Yes.
And are they using the lot for agriculture purposes?
Does not appear, but we did send notice to the owners, haven't heard from the owners on that, but from what we can tell, just driving by and looking at aerial photos, it doesn't look like there's ag use on this portion of the property.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to continue our Steve Pastrick show. So we'll go to application GPZ 2024.
Thank you, Mayor. So this next one is a request by Paul and Corrine Swenson to rezone property. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger here. So this one is at 4053 South, 7200 West, just under 3 acres. The zoning right now is the agricultural zone, and the general plan is for large lot residential, and the request is to change the general plan to light manufacturing and the zoning to the M zone of the manufacturing zone. So here's a close-up of that. So you have, there are a couple of homes that are rental homes on the property now. To the east and north, you have just single-family detached subdivision. On the west side of 7200 West is a new regional park that the county has built. And then the city owns the parcel directly south, where it's one that's been used for storage of garbage cans, and also animal control has larger animals that are housed there for animal control. So before getting into the proposed use, I think it's important to point out the overpressure zones, which I think are an important point here. So these 3 kind of black circles you see there represent the different overpressure zones. So the way that works is the outermost ring is the least restrictive, and then as you move inward closer to Northrop Grumman, it's more restrictive. And so in that innermost circle, which you can see bisects the property in question here. So that small parcel in the center of the screen in red is the property in question. So that innermost circle actually prohibits residential use. So roughly 40% of the property can't be residential because of the overpressure zone. So that was one of the kind of main contributors in the applicant looking at doing storage, is that number one, residential can't be at least on a portion of the property, and it would be awkward to have residential in the back and then something else in the front. So that's, and then also in looking at what I'll show here in a minute in terms of storage, is that when you consider the manufacturing zone, there are certainly other uses that could be more impactful or problematic to the neighbors, but storage tends to be a quieter use. So here's the concept plan. So again, they are proposing storage units on the property. And there are a couple of things I'll get into here in terms of detail, but throughout the city, we have a number of storage unit properties that are adjacent to residential. And in many cases, not all, in many cases, those are built right to the property line. Now, the code actually requires that there be a setback, but in many instances, there's been, the Board of Adjustment has made an exception to allow the building to be placed on the property line. And the reason for that has been security concerns, where if you think about like a storage building, if you provide a setback and you have a wall at the property line, you kind of create this space that no one ever sees. And we've run into problems with that. So I'll get into more detail on that here in a minute, but this is, again, generally the concept that's proposed. Got some photos. So this is one of the rental homes that's on the property now. This is the other rental home on the property. This is the home on the property to the north. This is the entrance to the city-owned property that's south of the property in question. This is looking north on 7200 West, so you can see the county park, the left-hand side, that's their entry or entrance feature. This is looking south, so you can see the railroad crossing. Now, this is important. Sorry, there's a lot of nuance to this one. So the city's Public Works Department has plans to, as you heard from our tour last week, to do reconstruction on this section of 7200 West. And part of that will involve near the railroad tracks, having an area that's flat essentially on either side of the track. So instead of just, coming up to the tracks and then, sloping up and then hitting the tracks, but you'd have kind of a table, if you will, and then slope out from there. Well, by doing that, that does create some need to do some regrading, and that'll be important as I talk about some of the details in the development agreement. So normally I don't go into this level of detail, but I think it's important on this one. So in this development agreement, it includes these provisions. Okay, so the first is that the use would be limited to self-storage, so they couldn't do any of the other uses that are allowed in the industrial or the manufacturing zone. The second is that it would allow them to build the buildings along the north and east sides at the property line. Okay, so that means that essentially becomes the fence is that building, but those buildings would be limited to 10 feet in height. So, because you have some storage buildings that are taller than that, so we're limiting the height to 10 feet. Number three, again, this is related to the project on 7200 West. They would dedicate right-of-way to the city to make way for the road widening. You may recall, we recently amended the code to allow the payment of, a developer to make a payment to the city in lieu of putting in improvements. So again, if you think about that grading issue I talked about with the railroad tracks, if the developer were to put in the curb and gutter now, and we came back later and did the road project, that would have to be torn out to accommodate the regrading. So this is one of those great examples where it makes more sense to hold off on that and just take the cash and then to apply that to the city's project at a future date. Another one that was requested from Public Works had to do with the landscaping, and this is one that frankly the Planning Commission debated at length. And it's the balancing act of, okay, if the full amount of landscaping gets put in, a lot of that will have to be torn out as part of the regrading. But the Planning Commission didn't love the idea of just nothing, so they suggested that there be just essentially bark or rock mulch put in for now, and that once the road project is completed, then they would put in plant material and irrigation. So it was sort of a compromise approach, if you will. And then finally, again, because of the regrading, just issuing or the developer issuing the city a temporary construction easement that would apply to the first 20 or the west 20 feet of the property. So again, just thinking about with the road being most likely elevated in this point, being able to use that 20 feet to essentially provide some slope before you get to the buildings, if that makes sense. So again, sorry for lots of detail there, but that's what's in the development agreement. Then I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this was something the Planning Commission requested. So we put in the packet images of all of the storage unit projects in the city that are up against residential. So here's one just off of Redwood, where in this case, they did put in the 10 feet. And interestingly, the resident to the east actually would have, in hindsight now prefers that the buildings would have been placed at property line, because you have kind of this space in between that they've had some issues with transients in that space. Here's one near the city shops built at property line. This one, actually, the residential hasn't been built yet, but this one was built to property line. There'll be townhomes to the north. One, again, built to property line on the west. This one was built to property line on the north and west sides. Here's one that's on the south end's built to property line, but then they also have some like RV storage there on the north side. Then on this image, this one actually has a canal along the south side, so there is some separation from the residential. Built to property line, another one built to property line. This one provided the 10 or a setback, and they also have had issues on this one. This one fairly new, built to property line. And this one was actually built at the 10 feet, which is what we're suggesting, at least for the buildings. You can see on the eastern edge there, there's that kind of skinny row of buildings. That's the 10-foot buildings, and then the ones more in the center are taller. Another one very similar to further south. So, sorry, lots of images here. So this is the project, used to be called King Arthur Storage on 48th and 35th. So you can see that space. So the wall that's required, and then the storage building right next to that. A couple of other images. So the landscaping starts to get overgrown, or in this case, trees dying. They've had issues with people getting in this space and then hopping on top of the storage buildings. Here's a couple of different angles of that. And while they do have cameras, they just don't capture all the different angles there. And then this is the one on just off of Redwood, where you can see the home on the east, on the right side, and then the block building on the left side is the storage building. And just again, on the one on the left is that space in between the wall and the building. And then the one on the right is actually from the neighbor's yard looking over at the storage. So that's the last image there. So again, just from the planning commission's recommendation was approval, but then again, using the development agreement to allow the buildings to be built at property line, but with those other restrictions. Sorry, that was really long, but I felt like it was important.
Okay, thank you. So to the council, any questions of Steve?
I just had a question on the overpressurization zone. There are homes north of the park that lie in the short road. And didn't it seem like we just reduced, or we did, the zone was reduced not too long ago. So I don't know. This.
So the park, you're saying the county park, correct? Yeah, so anything outside, so the overpressure zones, at least for our overpressure zones, we regulate those within the city. Outside the city would be the county, and not really sure how they have administered that. Some of those, in fact, I think many of those homes north of the park were there for a long time. So they may have actually, again, I'd have to look at the timing, but some of those may have existed even before the overpressure zone was put in place.
This zone is the one that was.
Right, this is one that remained.
Given the limited availability of open developable land in the city, we talk frequently about the distribution of, I guess, the composition of different types of housing, for example. So I think we're a little more familiar with that. I'm not familiar about the market for self-storage and that, and in terms of the city, how much of that service or amenity we offer compared to others stands. Sure. Can you give an idea of, you know what I'm saying, what I'm asking?
I think so. So we actually can provide, if it's helpful to the council, a map of all of the storage unit projects in the city. And just in speaking with the developer, he's done, and I know he can speak to this here in a couple of weeks, some initial market analysis and found that there is a demand for additional storage. We don't have access to that same kind of data, but we can at least show where all of the existing storage unit projects are in the city, if that's helpful.
I think for me, it would be just to give a comparison, especially with other cities of our size or our neighboring cities. I guess this is something that we have more of or less of.
Yeah, I don't have at least readily available storage units outside the city, but inside the city I do. That might be something I can get for other cities, so I can look into that, but for sure I have it in the city.
So I was looking through the emails and I did get one from a resident who was asking, no, it was actually a physical letter I got, that was asking what was going to be there. They didn't want manufacturing. Once they were told it was storage units, they were fine with that. And they just wanted to make sure that it could never change to anything else but storage units. And it sounds like the development agreement has that in it.
Correct.
So they were comfortable with it.
I appreciate you mentioning that, Mayor. So we did get some folks that came to the planning commission meeting in opposition. And then we also had folks that wrote letters in support of the use. So we had letters from two folks that live north of the property that actually were in support of the storage units. One thing too, I would just point out, because this is something that was discussed in planning commission, is that when it comes to that 10-foot height limitation, we did mention that that 10 feet would be measured from the bottom of the existing fence. So we didn't want to have a scenario where there's fill brought in and it's right, and it's higher than what it already, this side already is.
And then you really have a 15-foot fence on your side? Okay.
Is there a restriction on entrance and when you go to the self-storage site? Can we have visitors at midnight or 2 in the morning, or is it hours that it's open and available? Just wonder for the neighbors.
Yeah, so right now, there's no mention of a limitation on when that would be. I can follow up with the owners to see what their planned hours of operation are. I don't believe they're planning on it being 24 hours, but I can confirm that.
And there won't be any on-site manager that lives there?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So there would be like an office, but not a live-in manager.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now go to GPZ 2, 2024.
One more. This one's not of an end. All right, so this property will look familiar. It's just south of the one we were just looking at. So this is the city-owned property at 4063 South, 7200 West. It's on 2 acres. So again, here, as I mentioned, it's really just being used for storage. So the garbage cans, and then again, the larger animals for animal control. It's zoned agricultural right now, and the request is to rezone this to the manufacturing zone. So again, as you look at this one, even more of this property is in the overpressure zone. So this one's about half within the overpressure zone. So we wouldn't be able to do residential, at least on most of this property. Again, you've seen these pictures, at least this one's the entrance. This is just looking from kind of a little bit to the south, looking more to the northeast. And then again, the home that's on the property just north, 72 north looking, and then looking south on 72. I believe that's the last one. So why we're asking for this? So there's several reasons. So the first is that when it comes to outside storage, really that should be in the M zone. The ag zone doesn't really allow outside storage. So just making the use of the property more compliant with zoning. The second is when it comes to the animals, so the animals are allowed, but they're in the ag zone, but they're also allowed in the manufacturing zone. So they can be in either one. The third is that, as we mentioned earlier, that the overpressure zone covers about half the property, and the agriculture zone actually does allow residential, albeit on a half-acre lot. So the M zone's a little more compatible that way. But then probably the most significant is when you think about the storage units being built on the property to the north. So if the council feels that the zoning makes sense on the property north, If this one stays agricultural, that imposes additional regulations on the adjoining property because it stays agricultural. Whereas if this property is owned manufacturing, they don't have as many restrictions, if that makes sense. So for example, there's the setback requirement as well as height limitations that apply if you're next to agricultural that don't apply if the property is manufacturing. So that's probably the main driver here on that. So if the council doesn't feel that the adjoining property should be rezoned, then it's not as pressing to rezone this one.
And this would allow it to be built right on the property line, as if it stays agriculture, it'd have to have a bigger setback.
Correct. Although we could, so for the storage unit property on the east and north, the development agreement does say they can build a property line.
Right.
We didn't say that on the south because we were thinking that this property would get rezoned, right? The property to the south. But if it doesn't, we could still put in an exception if we wanted to, but that's either way would work.
Okay. Any questions from the council?
5 or 10-year projection for usage of that, should it be rezoned for manufacturing? Potential ideas of projects?
So we've actually talked about that as executive staff within the last few months. And right now there's really no projected use other than just kind of what we're doing right now. So just as an example with Public Works, it's more, I understand, economical to buy garbage cans in large kind of quantities and just having a place to store them. It just as cans get damaged, need to be replaced, they're just having a place to store them. That potentially could be relocated, but right now it's a good use. And while, so yeah, again, as we've talked about it, there's no change of use anticipated, but at the same time, we felt reluctant to surplus the property just because what was the phrase we heard the other day? They're not making land anymore. So we were kind of reluctant to let go of it. Just there may be a future use that's needed there. So.
Do we store the garbage cans inside of a building?
So
Are the garbage cans stored in a building?
no, there's no building on the site anymore. It's just a vacant lot.
And do we have a corral for the large animals then?
I believe so, and maybe Lane can help me out. Is there a corral on that site? Okay,
And a hay storage barn.
thank you.
Okay, so there is a barn of some sort. Okay. And is the outside storage allowed in manufacturing then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now turn the time over to Mr. Bunderson for resolution 24-82, our wireless franchise permit agreement.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a fairly straightforward one. It is a lease agreement for a cell tower that is very close to the Rocky Mountain Power Corridor. It's been there since 2000 and it expires next year. The company is now T-Mobile. It was something else before. And so what we're proposing, and frankly, what we would recommend, given the fact it's in close proximity to Rocky Mountain Power lines, so it's not going to ugly up anything, is that we renew this this cell tower lease. It's going to be $20,000 for the first few years, and then it'll jump up to $25,000 for 5 more years, and then $30,000 a year for the next 5 years after that. We don't have to do anything. They take care of it. They maintain it. They provide all the things necessary to run the cell tower. And so it would just be a nice little additional income to the city, and with really no downside that we can see. I will say that that's about market rate for a cell tower in Utah. Maybe even a little higher considering it's not a super big one. It's kind of a smaller site. So does council have any questions about that?
Okay, any questions? Nope.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now turn the time over to Chief Evans for resolution 24-83.
Thank you. This first is an agreement with Centura Health, Holy Cross Jordan Valley Hospital. For years, we've had agreements with the hospital to do for our critical care paramedics to do rapid intubations. They go into the OR and keep up their skills, which they need to do. We had an agreement with Stewart Health. Stewart Health sold to Centura, so this is just a new agreement with that company for us to do the rapid innovations.
That's a cool thing I would never have thought of. Okay, to the council, any questions?
Oh, yeah, I have one more. Thank you. John, is this, I believe we received a email from mayor or something. Yeah.
Forwarded, yeah, somebody,
Yeah, concern about people, they don't do like an emergency and have to go to Jordan.
so the concern was when we transport between the two Jordans, if they want to go somewhere else, we don't allow that. We only take between the two Jordans.
No,
That's what the email was,
no, we,
wherever they want to go.
unless it's a critical patient. If it's critical, the state has us go to the closest medical facility,
Okay,
which the closest medical facility is in West Valley. There are also some stipulations with Medicare and Medicaid that if they're on one of those, they have to go to the closest facility,
okay.
which is Jordan Valley, Holy Cross. The one in West Valley, not West
Right,
Jordan.
not Jordan.
No.
Okay, so we do follow their wishes if we pick them up at their
Yep.
house and.
Yep, their insurance, if we pick them up, they say my insurance is that they have to go to an IMC hospital, be it the IMC in Murray, Riverton, Sandy, we take them where they want to go.
That's my experience as well. Surprised to see that.
Interesting. Okay,
Thank you.
all right. And then we have resolution 24-84. New ambulance cabs and chassis.
Chassis. We need to buy 2 ambulance chassis. They're about 12 months out. We're asking that we buy 2 of these chassis and we drop ship them to Houston. Saves us about $15,000 if we just drop ship them right to the manufacturer. We're still out about 12 months. You'll be seeing another resolution coming on to put the boxes on the back of them. But right now, we're just trying to, Ford opened up to where we can get a couple of these larger Ford ambulance chassis. So that's what we're doing. This time you'll also see, this comes from the ambulance fund. You'll also see we're buying 2 4-wheel drive units to put on the west side.
Okay.
In the wintertime, we're having some hard times getting those ambulances in and out. So we're going to try a couple of 4-wheel drive ambulances.
That's a good idea. Okay, any questions for Chief on this one? Okay, thank you. Okay, we now have our consent agenda. All of these are pretty typical. We have 1 appointment to the Planning Commission, 3 appointments to the Clean and Beautiful, as well as our typical easements, deeds, real estate purchases. Most of the contracts on here are for the Lancer Way reconstruction and overlay project. So were there any questions or concerns? On the appointments for the Clean and Beautiful, they've been coming, those 3 appointments, almost the entire year and have been really heavily participating. So I think they'll do well. Okay, no questions. We'll go to our communication. I'll turn it to Nicole.
So this is just the ordinance that Councilman Nordfelt asked that we look at regarding public comment. Legal just drafted a small change in the ordinance that states citizen speakers shall limit themselves to city business and matters within the purview of the city. So we just
Okay.
wanted to bring you this draft before actually putting it on the agenda to make sure this is something that you guys are comfortable with moving forward.
Okay, any discussion?
I have a question. In our current ordinance, it says that citizen speakers shall refrain from personal attack against other citizens, city staff, and the city council. Is that legally okay to put in there?
It is.
Is it legal to enforce that?
So it's okay to have it in there. We can set decorum rules. This is kind of how we expect and ask our citizens to participate. But yes, enforcement is a challenge. We wouldn't really be able to remove someone unless they posed a threat or any type of violence. So yeah, we can ask it, but
If they use the wrong language or get hurt, we can't go tap them on the shoulder and ask them to leave, only if they disrupt the meeting
yes.
or threaten physical violence.
Correct, yep. So even if they speak up in the audience, outside of that, they're allotted 3 minutes. And they're causing a disruption, we can ask them to leave at that point as well. But yes, swear words or things that we don't like to hear, we really can't. Freedom of speech protects that.
Just let it roll.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, no other questions on that one?
So are we good to go ahead and add that to an agenda?
Say yes.
Looks like it.
Thank you.
All right, then we have two other items, the Supreme Court homeless discussion. We had an email explaining that. Did anybody have any other questions on that? They really haven't made a decision yet,
No,
so. Okay, let's kind of follow that one.
legal is tracking it, so any updates they'll be happy
Let us know, okay? And then the code enforcement courtesy notice, that was emailed out to us as well as far as the new QR code. Was that satisfactory to everyone?
So,
Okay. Awesome. Our council calendar. Were there any concerns? Okay, so we're not having the Memorial Day program at the Veterans Wall. So just a heads up on that. It's not on here, so don't expect to go. And then, that was the only one that was close by. Okay, any potential future agenda items? Nope. And council reports? Everybody's thinking, what did I do last week? Yeah. Okay. And do we have a need for a closed session today? Nope. Okay, we just have one more motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and we stand adjourned.